Nexus Prime hung suspended at the precise gravitational center of three suns, a testament to engineering brilliance that even the most cynical species in the galaxy had to acknowledge. The massive space station rotated slowly, its kilometer-long spires gleaming in the eternal daylight of the triple star system. Nexus had been constructed as neutral ground, the ultimate diplomatic forum where the galaxy's powers could gather without fear or favor. Ambassador Elena Reyes stood at the viewport of the diplomatic vessel. Hope, watching as the station grew larger in their approach. Despite the grandeur before her, her attention kept returning to the datapad in her hand, scrolling through intelligence reports with growing concern. Impressive, isn't it? Captain Marcus Hale stepped beside her, his weathered face reflecting the golden light of the three suns. Hard to believe something so beautiful could be the stage for what might become the galaxy's greatest military alliance. Or its greatest tragedy, Elena replied, switching off the datapad. This summit isn't about cooperation, Marcus. It's about consolidation of power. Hale nodded grimly. High Chancellor Vorton hasn't called representatives from 87 species together for a peace conference. No, Elena agreed. He's called them for war. She tucked a strand of silver-streaked black hair behind her ear, a nervous habit from her days as a junior diplomat. At 53, Ambassador Reyes carried herself with the gravity of someone who understood the weight of her responsibility. As Earth's primary representative, she spoke for over 15 billion humans, spread across the solar system and several colony worlds. Yet in the grand scheme of galactic politics, humanity remained a mere observer species, too young and untested to hold full membership in the Galactic Council. The older species still look down on us, Hale said, watching a fleet of crystalline ships from the Thraxi Imperium glide past them toward the docking bays. 200 years of spacefaring civilization isn't enough to impress beings who measure their histories in millennia. Elena smiled thinly. Perhaps today they'll learn that age doesn't always equate to wisdom. Behind them, the door to the bridge slid open. Admiral Kasumi Tanaka entered, her uniform impeccable, her expression carefully controlled. Ambassador, Captain, she greeted them with a slight nod. We've received our docking instructions. The Council representatives have requested your presence in the Grand Chamber immediately upon arrival. No welcome reception, Elena raised an eyebrow. They're certainly eager to begin. Operation Exodus? Hale asked quietly. Admiral Tanaka's eyes flicked briefly to the viewport, ensuring no other ships were within visual range. Proceeding as scheduled. Phase 1 is already 70% complete. And the Illusion Fleet? All vessels are in position. From any scanning technology, they appear fully staffed and armed. Elena closed her eyes briefly, the weight of what they were about to do pressing down on her shoulders. Then we're committed. We've been committed since the moment we intercepted Vorton's plans, Hale reminded her. Earth made its choice. Yes, Elena whispered. And now we'll see if it was the right one. The Hope approached the massive docking bay, a cavernous opening in the side of Nexus Prime. As they entered the artificial atmosphere, Elena could see dozens of ships from across the galaxy, sleek vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, living ships grown rather than built, and ancient craft that had witnessed the birth and death of stars. In less than an hour, she would sit at the great table and speak for humanity. And if their intelligence was correct, she would deliver a message that would shock the assembled powers of the galaxy. She only hoped the shock would buy them enough time. The Grand Chamber of Nexus Prime could have housed a small city. Its curved walls stretched upward for hundreds of meters, ending in a transparent dome that revealed the three suns in their eternal dance. At the center stood a circular table of polished black stone, large enough to accommodate representatives from 100 different species. Elena took her place at the table, noting the subtle positioning that reinforced the galactic hierarchy. The elder races nearest the center, the younger civilizations toward the periphery. Humanity's seat was second from the outermost ring, a not-so-subtle reminder of their status. High Chancellor Vorton sat at the table's exact center, his iridescent scales shifting color with each movement. The Draconian was ancient, even by his species' standards, rumored to have personally negotiated treaties that were now studied as historical documents. His 6 eyes swept the chamber, missing nothing. Representatives of the galaxy, his voice resonated through the chamber without apparent amplification. I welcome you to this historic summit. For too long, our civilizations have existed in a fragmented state, pursuing individual interests while greater threats loom at the edges of known space. Elena watched as the assembled delegates nodded in agreement. Intelligence reports had confirmed that most were already aware of Vorton's proposal and had come prepared to pledge their support. The Void Reavers grow stronger beyond the outer rim, Vorton continued. The dimensional incursions in the Cygnus sector have increased threefold in the past solar cycle. Even the quiescent domains have reported unusual activity. Holograms appeared above the table, showing disturbing images of devastated worlds and strange anomalies in space. Elena recognized the psychological tactics, fear as a motivator, the creation of a common enemy to forge alliances. Therefore, Vorton's voice grew more commanding. I propose the formation of the Grand Military Alliance, a unified force drawing from all our civilizations, under a centralized command structure. He paused, his central eyes fixing on each delegate in turn. Each member species will be required to commit no less than 30% of their military resources and 20% of their economic output to this alliance. Murmurs rose around the table, not of protest, Elena noted, but of affirmation. The groundwork had been well laid. We will now hear pledges from each representative, Vorton announced, beginning with the elder races and proceeding outward. One by one, the delegates rose to pledge their support. The Thraxi offered their quantum fleet, the Oldovan Conclave their psychic warriors, the Meridian Collective their planet-cracking weaponry. On and on it went, a parade of military might being offered to the altar of this new alliance. As the pledges moved outward through the rings, Elena felt the tension building in her chest. Soon, it would be humanity's turn. Captain Hale, seated behind her as her military advisor, leaned forward slightly. Remember, he whispered, we need exactly 9 minutes. When the delegate beside her, a multi-limbed being from the methane-breathing Vorax, finished their pledge, all eyes turned to Elena. She rose slowly, feeling the weight of 15 billion souls behind her words. High Chancellor Vorton, esteemed representatives of the galaxy, she began, her voice steady. Humanity has listened carefully to the proposals and pledges made here today. She paused, noting how Vorton's scales shifted to a confident amber hue, anticipating yet another pledge to add to his growing arsenal. On behalf of Earth and all human colonies, I must respectfully decline to join the Grand Military Alliance. The chamber fell silent, a silence so complete that Elena could hear the soft hum of the station's environmental systems. Then, like a wave gathering force, reactions spread outward from the center of the table. Laughter came first, dismissive, contemptuous laughter from several of the warrior species. Then murmurs of confusion from others. Vorton himself remained perfectly still, only the darkening of his scales to a deep crimson betraying his reaction. Perhaps, he said at last, his voice dangerously soft. The human representative misunderstands the nature of this gathering. This is not a request, Ambassador Reyes. It is the new order of the galaxy. Elena stood her ground. We understand perfectly, Chancellor. Humanity has always valued its right to self-determination. We choose peace. We choose neutrality. We choose not to commit our resources to warfare. Now the reactions turn to outrage. The Krell representative, a massive being encased in living armor, slammed a weaponized appendage onto the table, leaving a dent in the supposedly indestructible material. "The weakling species shows its true nature," the Krell boomed. "They have enjoyed the protection of greater powers, while contributing nothing." Others joined in, their accusations growing more heated. Elena remained standing, her expression composed, even as threats began to fly across the chamber. "The humans will be made an example of. Their colonies should be redistributed to worthy species. Neutrality is complicity with the enemy." Through it all, Vortan watched Elena with his ancient eyes, a calculating look that concerned her more than all the threats combined. When he finally raised a clawed hand, the chamber fell silent once more. "Ambassador Reyes," he said, "perhaps you would reconsider your position when presented with the full consequences of your decision." He gestured, and a hologram appeared above the table, a detailed strategic map of Earth's solar system and colonial outposts. "The Alliance will require defensive positions in all sectors," he continued. "Should Earth refuse to participate, we would be forced to establish these positions regardless, by whatever means necessary." The threat hung in the air, clear to everyone present. Elena checked the time display on her console. 7 minutes had passed. She needed to keep them engaged for 2 more. "Are you threatening Earth with military action if we don't join your alliance willingly?" she asked, letting indignation color her voice. "I am explaining reality," Vortan replied. "The frontier of any conflict must be established as far from core worlds as possible. If Earth will not be part of the frontier, it will be behind it." Elena spread her hands on the table. "And this is how the Grand Military Alliance begins? By coercing its first unwilling member. What does that say about the foundation you're building, Chancellor?" Murmurs again, but different now. A few voices of uncertainty mixing with the hostility. Vortan's scales darkened further. "Humanity has benefited from galactic stability without contributing to it," he said. "That time is over. You have 1 standard cycle to reconsider your position. After that, the Alliance will take necessary measures to secure your sector, with or without your cooperation." Elena checked her display again. 9 minutes. She nodded almost imperceptibly to Hale, who touched a small device on his wrist. "We will not reconsider," Elena said, her voice ringing through the chamber. "Humanity chooses its own path, as we always have. We will not be part of your war machine." She sat down as the chamber erupted into chaos, threats and accusations flying across the table. But beneath the noise, a subtle vibration ran through the station, unnoticeable to anyone not specifically waiting for it. Phase 2 of Operation Exodus had begun. In the 3 days following the disastrous opening of the summit, the Grand Chamber became a theater of political maneuvering and thinly veiled threats. Elena found herself at the center of a diplomatic storm, summoned to endless meetings with factions both hostile and, surprisingly, sympathetic. The Ataraxian Consortium, a collective of philosopher species, had quietly expressed support for Earth's position. The Iridian Observer, an ancient being of pure energy, had spent hours questioning Elena about humanity's moral reasoning. Even some military powers had reached out privately, uncomfortable with the degree of centralization Vortan was proposing. But these potential allies were far outnumbered by the hostile majority. The Krell had formally proposed Earth's subjugation as the first action of the new alliance. The Thraxi suggested economic blockades to bring the humans to reason. The Meridian Collective merely advocated for humanity's supervised evolution, a euphemism for cultural re-engineering that sent chills down Elena's spine. Through it all, she maintained Earth's position while secretly coordinating with Captain Hale and Admiral Tanaka. Operation Exodus was proceeding faster than anticipated, helped by the fact that all attention was focused on the diplomatic crisis rather than movements in human space. On the 4th day, Elena was summoned to a private audience with High Chancellor Vortan himself. The meeting room was small by Nexus Prime standards, with a viewport offering a spectacular view of the three suns in alignment. Ambassador Reyes, Vortan, gestured to a seat designed to accommodate human physiology. I appreciate your willingness to meet privately. I've never shied away from dialogue, Chancellor, Elena replied, taking the offered seat. Vortan's scales shifted to a more neutral blue-green. I've studied human history extensively, you know. A fascinating progression from warring tribes to global civilization to stellar expansion. Your species accomplishes in centuries what takes others millennia. We're adaptable, Elena said simply. Indeed. Which is why your position puzzles me. Vortan leaned forward. You must realize that standing alone against the unified galaxy is untenable. We don't see ourselves as standing against anyone, Chancellor. We simply choose not to participate in military action. Vortan's secondary eyes blinked in a pattern that Elena recognized as skepticism. A luxury you can afford only because others are willing to fight. The threats beyond the rim are real. Ambassador, the alliance is necessary. Perhaps, but forcing unwilling participants undermines the very strength you're trying to build. The Chancellor studied her for a long moment. You are hiding something, he said at last. My advisors believe you're stalling for time while Earth builds its defenses. A futile effort. Elena allowed herself a small smile. We're not building anything, Chancellor. It wasn't even a lie, technically. They weren't building, they were evacuating. Then you condemn your people to subjugation, Vortan said, his scales darkening again. The alliance vote proceeds tomorrow. With or without Earth support, the combined fleet will establish control over human space immediately afterward, for the greater good of the galaxy. I understand, Elena said, rising from her seat. And I hope someday you will understand our position as well. As she turned to leave, Vortan spoke again. Ambassador, I am curious. What principle is worth the sacrifice of your civilization? Elena paused at the door. The right to choose peace, Chancellor, always. In her quarters aboard the Hope, Elena found Captain Hale and Admiral Tanaka waiting with Lieutenant Commander Jabari Singh, their communications specialist. Status? She asked without preamble. 87% complete, Admiral Tanaka reported. The main colony evacuations are finished. We're now retrieving deep space research stations and isolated outposts. And the Illusion fleet is maintaining its patrols? Elena asked. Hale nodded. As far as any observation can tell, human space is proceeding normally. The drone ships are following standard patterns. Colonies are transmitting regular communications. Defense platforms are fully staffed. The final vote is tomorrow, Elena said. Vortan made it clear they'll move against Earth immediately afterward. Then we need to accelerate, Tanaka said. I'll order the remaining extraction teams to operate at maximum capacity. Lieutenant Commander Singh cleared his throat. Ambassador, we've received a transmission from Dr. Mira Stanton on Luna Base. She says it's urgent, something about historical precedent. Elena frowned. Put her through. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the face of Dr. Mira Stanton, Earth's foremost xenohistorian. Her eyes were wide with excitement, her normally immaculate appearance disheveled. Ambassador! I found it! The evidence we needed! She exclaimed without preamble. The progenitors. They did exactly what we're planning. Slow down, Doctor, Elena said. What are you talking about? The progenitors, Stanton gestured animatedly. The species that vanished 10,000 years ago that everyone thought went extinct. I've been decoding their library artifacts from the Arcturus excavation. They didn't go extinct. They left. Elena exchanged glances with the others. The progenitors were a legendary elder race whose artifacts were still being discovered throughout the galaxy, but whose fate had remained a mystery. Left how? Hale asked. And why is this relevant now? They faced a similar situation, Stanton explained, pulling up ancient texts on her screen. A galactic coalition tried to force them into a war against extra-dimensional invaders. Instead of fighting, they enacted what they called the Great Departure. Their entire civilization disappeared overnight. They committed mass suicide? Tanaka asked, horrified. No, no, Stanton shook her head vigorously. They transcended, moved their entire civilization into a self-contained pocket dimension. And here's the key part. The records say they returned centuries later, evolved beyond recognition. Elena leaned forward. You're saying they came back? Yes. The species we know as the Iridian Observer. I believe they're the evolved form of the progenitors. The timeline matches, and there are linguistic markers in their communication patterns that align with progenitor syntax. The Iridian, Elena whispered. The energy being who had questioned her so thoroughly about human ethics now appeared in a new light. They've been watching, Hale realized. All this time, they've been observing how the galaxy developed after they left. And now they're watching us, Elena said. As we prepare to make the same choice. Admiral Tanaka's expression was troubled. This changes our calculations. If the Iridian is indeed a progenitor, and they've expressed interest in our position, then we may have the most powerful ally in the galaxy, Elena finished. One that Vortan doesn't even recognize. She turned back to Stanton's hologram. Doctor, this information is crucial. I need you to compile everything you have on the progenitor's departure and the evidence linking them to the Iridian. Transmit it directly to my secure channel. Already done, Ambassador, Stanton replied. And there's one more thing. The progenitors left markers behind, messages in stone that survived millennia, explaining their choice to anyone who could decipher them. A precedent and a playbook, Elena murmured. Dr. Stanton, your timing is impeccable. After the transmission ended, Elena paced the room, her mind racing. We need to speak with the Iridian before tomorrow's vote. If they are indeed evolved progenitors, their support could change everything. Or, Hale suggested, we proceed as planned. But with this new information, we design our own marker, a message to explain our departure. Both, Elena decided. We do both. Admiral, continue with Exodus at maximum speed. Captain, work with Dr. Stanton on creating our marker. I'll arrange a meeting with the Iridian Observer. As they departed to their tasks, Elena turned to the viewport, gazing at Nexus Prime, silhouetted against the three suns. For the first time since the summit began, she felt a glimmer of hope. They weren't just fleeing. They were following a path that had been walked before. The Iridian Observer had no need for conventional meeting rooms. When Elena requested an audience, she received coordinates to a maintenance corridor in an isolated section of Nexus Prime. There, she found a shimmering presence, a being of pure energy that undulated in patterns too complex for the human eye to fully comprehend. Ambassador Elena Reyes, the Iridian's voice, seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Your request intrigued me. Few seek private audience with an observer. Elena bowed slightly. I appreciate your willingness to meet. I've recently received information that might interest you as well. Information about the progenitors? Yes? And their great departure? The energy being pulsed with what might have been amusement. Dr. Mira Stanton is quite perceptive for one so young. Elena felt her heartbeat quicken. Then it's true. You are evolved progenitors? The Iridian's form contracted slightly. What is true spans more dimensions than your language can express. Ambassador, but in the limited framework of your question, yes. What you know as Iridians were once the biological entities you call progenitors. You face the same choice we face now, Elena said. Forced participation in a war not of your choosing. The patterns repeat across time, the Iridian acknowledged. Different actors, same dynamics, force versus choice, fear versus possibility. We've chosen to leave rather than fight, Elena said. Operation Exodus will remove humanity from this conflict entirely, the energy being pulsed more rapidly. A choice with consequences. Ambassador, the galaxy will not understand. They will feel abandoned, then betrayed. As they felt when the progenitors left? Indeed. But our departure served a purpose beyond mere survival. It allowed evolution that would have been impossible within the constraints of conventional space. Elena leaned forward. What are you saying? Your technological capabilities are surprising for such a young species. The Iridian's voice seemed to shift in tone. Your understanding of dimensional mechanics exceeds where the progenitors were at your age. Your dark phase protocols are crude but effective. Elena felt a chill. The Iridian knew about dark phase, the technology that would effectively remove Earth and its colonies from the normal space-time continuum. Information that was among humanity's most closely guarded secrets. You've been watching us, she realized. Observing, the Iridian corrected. It is our purpose, and now we observe you taking a step few species have the courage to attempt. Will you tell the others, Vortan and the Alliance? The energy being expanded slightly. Observers do not interfere. We document, we witness, we remember. Even if it means watching another war? Elena challenged. Even then, the Iridian confirmed, but then added, however, observation does not preclude context. I will address the Council before the final vote. I will provide historical context about choices made in similar circumstances throughout galactic history. Elena understood the subtle offer. Thank you. As she turned to leave, the Iridian spoke once more. Ambassador Reyes, the garden has space for more seeds. Remember that when the time comes. Before she could ask what that meant, the energy being had vanished, leaving her alone in the corridor with more questions than answers, but also with a growing sense that humanity's path, however radical it seemed, might indeed be the right one. The final vote was a mere formality. Despite the Iridian observer's unexpected testimony about historical patterns of forced alliances leading to cultural stagnation, the majority of species voted to establish the Grand Military Alliance. Only a handful, mostly philosophical collectives and non-interventionist observers, abstained. Elena sat through it all, watching as Vortan's vision took formal shape. The combined fleet would be established immediately. Resource quotas would begin within one standard cycle. And the first act of the new alliance would be to secure human space, a euphemism that fooled no one. When the vote concluded, Vortan turned his 6 eyes toward Elena. Ambassador Reyes, in light of the Council's decision, does Earth wish to reconsider its position? Elena rose from her seat, feeling all eyes upon her. Chancellor, representatives of the galaxy, humanity's position remains unchanged. We choose peace. We choose self-determination. We choose our own path. Then you choose extinction, the Krell representative growled. No, Elena said calmly. We simply choose to leave the table. Confusion rippled through the chamber. Vortan's scales shifted to a puzzled orange hue. Explain yourself, Ambassador, he demanded. Elena straightened her shoulders. For too long, the galaxy has operated on the assumption that military might is the only viable response to threats. That those who choose peace are choosing weakness. We reject that false dichotomy. She gestured toward the vast chamber. You have built impressive civilizations, advanced technologies, and now this grand alliance. But you have failed to evolve beyond the use of force as your primary tool. Outrage erupted from several quarters, but Elena continued, her voice cutting through the noise. Humanity will not participate in your war, nor will we be its victim. We are removing ourselves from the equation entirely. Removing, Vortan repeated, his confusion evident. You speak in riddles, human. No riddles, Chancellor. Simple truth. Elena nodded to Lieutenant Commander Singh, who activated a holographic display at the center of the table. The image showed a live feed from Earth orbit, where thousands of massive ships, far more than anyone had believed humanity possessed, were gathered in a formation that spanned the horizon. "What you see is the culmination of Operation Exodus," Elena explained. "For the past week, while this summit debated, we have been evacuating Earth and all human colonies. 15 billion people transferred to our Exodus fleet." Stunned silence fell over the chamber as the implications sank in. Vortan's scales paled to an ashen gray. "Impossible," he finally whispered. "Our intelligence would have detected such a massive operation." Captain Hale stepped forward. "Your intelligence saw what we wanted them to see. Chancellor, the Illusion Fleet, empty ships controlled remotely, maintaining normal patrol patterns, holographic projections of population centers, automated colonial transmissions." "But why?" asked the representative from the Ataraxian Consortium. "Where will you go?" "To a place where we can evolve without the constant pressure of militarization," Elena answered. Dr. Mira Stanton discovered that we are not the first to make this choice. The progenitors did the same, 10,000 years ago, when faced with a similar situation. She looked directly at the Iridian observer, whose energy form pulsed in what might have been acknowledgement. "We make this choice not in fear, but in hope," Elena continued, "not as an ending, but as a beginning." The holographic display shifted to show massive engines activating across the Exodus fleet. Then, one by one, the ships began to fold somehow, disappearing from normal space in a way that defied conventional understanding. "This is the dark phase," Elena explained, as the council watched in stunned silence. "Dimensional transition on a scale never before attempted by my species. Earth and all human colonies will enter a self-contained pocket dimension, beyond the reach of the Alliance or any other external force." Vortan rose from his seat, his scales now flashing multiple colors in agitation. "Stop this. Whatever you're doing, stop it immediately. This is desertion in the face of galactic need." "No, Chancellor," Elena replied calmly. "This is evolution in the face of stagnation." The holographic feed showed the last ships of the Exodus fleet folding out of normal space, leaving only empty orbit around a blue-green planet. "The Alliance forces will find our worlds empty," Captain Hale said. "No resources to claim, no populations to subjugate, no technology to appropriate. Just empty worlds and a message." "What message?" demanded the Krell representative. In answer, the hologram shifted one final time, showing a massive stone monolith that had appeared in Earth orbit. Carved into its surface in dozens of galactic languages were the words, "We chose to leave rather than to fight. We chose evolution rather than destruction. When you are ready to do the same, you will find us in the garden." As the representatives watched, Earth itself began to shimmer, its very substance seeming to blur and fade. In a matter of minutes, where a living planet had been, there was nothing but empty space, and the floating monolith, its message a challenge to the galaxy. "What have you done?" Vortan whispered, his voice barely audible. "We've changed the game," Elena answered. "Phase shift complete, Captain." Hale checked his device and nodded. "All human worlds and colonies confirmed transitioned. Operation Exodus is complete." Elena turned back to the stunned council. "Representatives of the galaxy, this is where humanity leaves your table. Our delegate status is hereby withdrawn. We wish you wisdom in your endeavors." With that, she removed her council insignia and placed it on the table. Then she, Captain Hale, and all human personnel present began walking toward the chamber's exit. "You cannot simply leave," Vortan called after them, his composure finally breaking. "The Alliance will find you. Whatever dimensional trick you've employed, we will overcome it." Elena paused at the doorway. "You're welcome to try, Chancellor." But I suggest instead that you ponder why we chose this path, and what it says about the alliance you've created. As the human delegation departed, the council chamber dissolved into chaos, accusations, threats, and beneath it all, a current of fear. Fear not of what humanity had done, but of what their action represented. For the first time in millennia, a species had found a third option beyond submission or destruction, and the galaxy would never be the same. The months following humanity's disappearance were marked by confusion, anger, and eventually, uncertainty throughout the galaxy. The Grand Military Alliance launched its first operation as planned. A massive fleet converged on the solar system, prepared to establish control over humanity's worlds. Instead, they found empty space where Earth had been, barren rocks where colonies should have thrived, and automated stations devoid of life. The only human presence remaining was the enigmatic stone monolith orbiting where Earth once existed. Vortan personally led expeditions to study the phenomenon, bringing the Alliance's greatest scientific minds to understand how an entire civilization had seemingly erased itself from the universe. Their findings were troubling, trace evidence of dimensional manipulation beyond anything currently known to galactic science. Meanwhile, disturbing reports began to emerge from the frontiers. Alliance patrol ships vanishing without trace, strange dimensional fluctuations in formerly human space, automated distress calls that, when investigated, led to empty sectors. 6 months after Exodus, the Alliance Council convened again in the Grand Chamber of Nexus Prime. The mood was somber, the earlier triumph of unity now overshadowed by growing concerns. "The pattern is unmistakable," reported Admiral Zolan of the Thraxi fleet. "Every incursion into former human territory results in ships disappearing. 47 vessels lost in the past month alone." "They're fighting back from their hiding place," the Krell representative snarled. The Iridian observer's energy form pulsed. "Is that the only possible interpretation of the evidence?" All eyes turned to the ancient being. "What other explanation could there be?" Vortan demanded, his scales a dull orange of frustration. "Perhaps," the Iridian suggested, "they are not attacking your ships at all. Perhaps they are inviting them." "Inviting?" Vortan repeated incredulously. "The garden has space for more seeds," the observer said, echoing the cryptic phrase it had shared with Elena months earlier. "Have you considered that your missing ships haven't been destroyed, but relocated?" A murmur ran through the chamber as the implications sank in. Not an attack, but an extraction. Not destruction, but salvation. "We've intercepted transmissions," admitted a representative from the Meridian Collective, who had previously been among the most aggressive advocates for punishing humanity. Cryptic messages from crews thought lost. They speak of wonders, of a place beyond normal space where evolution proceeds at an accelerated rate. Propaganda, Vortan dismissed. Human psychological warfare. But the doubt had been planted, and it grew stronger when reports came in of entire colony worlds, small outposts of various species who had opposed the alliance, vanishing overnight, leaving behind only stone monoliths with the same message. A year after Exodus, the first major defection occurred. The Ataraxian Consortium, after months of philosophical debate, announced their withdrawal from the alliance. Before Vortan could respond, their homeworlds shifted out of normal space, leaving behind the now familiar monoliths. The pattern repeated with increasing frequency. The Thalasi Communion, the empathic collective of Deneb, the free worlds of the Perseus Arm, one by one, civilizations chose to follow humanity's path. Each disappearance weakened the alliance. Each monolith raised more questions, and beneath it all ran a current of realization. Humanity hadn't fled in fear. They had pioneered a new form of existence, one that offered an alternative to the endless cycle of conflict and dominance. 2 years after Exodus, with nearly a third of member species having departed, the alliance was in crisis. Vortan, His scales, now permanently faded to a dull gray, addressed a diminished council. The defections must be stopped, he insisted. This dimensional exodus threatens the very fabric of galactic society. Does it? Asked the representative from the Cygnus Cooperative, one of the few remaining philosophical collectives. Or does it simply threaten the old order, your order, Chancellor? Before Vortan could respond, the chamber's lighting flickered. A shimmering appeared at the center of the great table, coalescing into a familiar figure, Ambassador Elena Reyes. But changed. Her physical form seemed both solid and not, outlined in a subtle luminescence that shifted with her movements. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics impossible in normal space. "Greetings, representatives of the galaxy," she said. "I come as an emissary from what we now call the Garden, the dimensional space where humanity and our fellow travelers have made our home." "Travelers?" Vortan rose from his seat. "You mean the civilizations you've abducted?" Elena smiled. "No one has been taken against their will, Chancellor. We merely opened a door. Many have chosen to walk through it." "To what end?" demanded the Krell. "What do you gain by dismantling the galaxy's order?" "Not dismantling," Elena corrected. "Evolving. In the Garden, we've discovered possibilities beyond anything achievable in normal space-time. Acceleration of physical and consciousness evolution. Synthesis of diverse biological and technological pathways. Freedom from the constraints that have kept galactic civilization locked in cycles of conflict for millennia." She gestured, and a holographic window opened, showing glimpses of a realm that defied easy description. Structures of impossible geometry, beings of multiple phases, energy and matter intertwined in ways that challenged comprehension. "This is what awaits," Elena said. "Not an escape, but a transcendence." "And you've returned to—" "What?" Vortan asked, his voice weary. "Gloat over the disruption you've caused?" Elena shook her head. "To extend an invitation. The Garden grows, Chancellor. There is room for all who wish to join us, including you and the Alliance." A stunned silence fell over the chamber. "The choice that faced humanity now faces the galaxy," Elena continued. "Evolution beyond conflict, or continuation of the old patterns. The door is open. The Garden welcomes all seeds." With that, her image began to fade. "Wait," called the representative from the Cygnus Cooperative. How do we find this door?" Elena's smile was the last thing to fade. "The monoliths are more than messages. They're gateways, waiting to be activated by those who truly choose a different path." After she vanished, the chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, representatives began to rise from their seats. "My people will consider this invitation," announced the Cygnus representative. "As will mine," agreed another, then another. Vortan watched in disbelief as the council he had so carefully constructed began to disintegrate before his eyes. Not through force, not through fear, but through choice, the very principle Elena had championed from the beginning. In the years that followed, the Grand Military Alliance gradually dissolved. Species after species activated the monolithic gateways, their civilizations transitioning to the dimensional space now widely known as the Garden. The threats from beyond the rim that Vortan had warned about did indeed materialize, but found a galaxy largely emptied of the resources they sought to consume. A century after Exodus, Nexus Prime stood nearly abandoned, a relic of an age of politics and power that had given way to something new. In the Grand Chamber where the Alliance had been born, only two figures remained: the aged Vortan, his once brilliant scales now dull and faded, and the Iridian observer. "They were right," Vortan admitted at last. "I was so certain force was the only answer." "A common limitation of linear thinking," the Iridian replied, its energy form pulsing gently. "The cycle repeats until someone chooses differently." "Is it too late?" Vortan asked, gazing at the empty seats around the table. "For me, For my people? The garden does not recognize too late, the observer said. Time flows differently there. The door remains open to all who choose it. Vortan rose slowly, his ancient body moving with effort. Then perhaps it is time for even old warriors to learn new ways. Together, they approached the monolith that had been installed in the chamber years before, a final gateway for those who had clung longest to the old order. As Vortan placed his scaled hand upon its surface, the stone began to glow. "What will I find there?" he asked, hesitating at the threshold. "Evolution," the Iridian answered. "The next stage of existence, as it was for the progenitors, as it is now for humanity, as it will be for all who choose to grow beyond conflict." The gateway opened, revealing a realm of light and possibility. Vortan stepped through, his form already beginning to transform as he crossed the dimensional boundary. The Iridian observer, last of the evolved progenitors, remained behind briefly, watching as Nexus Prime systems initiated their long-planned shutdown sequence. Its purpose fulfilled. The station would drift between the three suns, a monument to a phase of galactic history now complete. Then, the observer too passed through the gateway, which sealed behind it, leaving the chamber empty, save for the echoes of civilizations that had chosen to leave the table, and in doing so, had found a greater feast awaiting them in the garden beyond. In the garden, dimensions beyond human comprehension unfurled like the petals of a cosmic flower. Species that had once been bound by physical laws now explored new forms of existence, new modes of thought, new pathways of evolution. At the heart of this realm stood a structure that defied description in conventional language, a nexus, not of politics, but of possibility, where representatives of all garden species shared their discoveries and celebrated their diversity. Elena Reyes, her form now as much energy as matter, watched as children from 100 different species played in a multi-dimensional meadow. Among them was a young draconian, scales shifting through colors that had never existed in normal space, laughing as he learned to manipulate the fabric of reality alongside his companions. Captain Hale, or the consciousness that had once been Hale, manifested beside her. "Vortan's grandson," he observed. "Hard to believe his lineage would become some of our most enthusiastic explorers." Elena smiled. "Evolution takes unexpected paths. That's the beauty of choice." They watched the children play, beings who would never know the limitations of the galaxy their ancestors had left behind. For them, peace wasn't a choice made in defiance of war. It was simply the natural state of existence. "The Iridian was right," Elena said softly. "The garden had space for all seeds. And more still to come." Hale agreed, gesturing toward the dimensional boundaries where new gateways were forming, as yet more civilizations made their choice. In the space between universes, humanity had found not just survival, but transcendence. Not just peace, but evolution. Not just a hiding place, but a garden where all seeds could grow into forms their ancestors could never have imagined. And somewhere, in the empty chamber of Nexus Prime, the stone monoliths continued their silent vigil, waiting for the day when the last travelers would make their choice and join the new existence that had begun when humanity chose to leave the table.